Some of the heroes in Marvel Rivals are fundamentally broken, and I think that's beautiful. I say this because the game takes a lot of character archetypes that many gamers are already familiar with and makes them much more interesting while still somehow making them work for some of the most recognizable characters in pop culture. Sure, Marvel Rivals is a pretty blatant Overwatch clone, and the core gameplay is nothing to write home about, even with the semi-destructible environment. But this is not where Marvel Rivals reinvents the wheel. But where it does is in pushing the boundaries of what's possible in terms of character design. The game does not pull its punches when it comes to fulfilling your power fantasy for the sake of balancing, and that is essential to getting right when your game is literally about superheroes. One of the best examples of breaking character design norms is with Iron Man. It feels like devs these days are afraid of making characters that fly. Pharah from Overwatch is an example. She has one skill that's pretty much just a super jump and a passive hover which works with a fuel bar, and it's up to you as a player on how you manage that fuel bar to stay up in the air. Valkyrie from Apex Legends is another example. You have this cool character with a jetpack and wings, but she's also limited by a fuel mechanic and a cooldown. Yes, these characters can fly and they can hover, but there's a pretty big asterisk there because they're still meant to be grounded as part of their balancing. And as someone who didn't follow the beta for the game, I thought Iron Man would be something similar. I thought he'd be hovering at ground level like most characters, and then he'd have a cooldown that lets him take into the air for a bit. But no. The Marvel Rivals devs made Iron Man a fully fledged, permanently flying character, like he's supposed to be. I mean, besides that, he is a pretty cookie-cutter flying character with rockets and laser, and his real mobility being gated behind a resource bar, but I mean just the fact that they committed to making this beloved character permanently flying in his gameplay shows that these devs have the cojones to do what others don't. And despite being a permanently flying character, I'd argue that he's pretty balanced. Just pick someone like the Punisher, Black Widow, Winter Soldier, or even Rocket Raccoon if you're a healer and swat him like a fly. Another thing is making melee-centric characters in a game where most characters have ranged options. And looking at Marvel's catalog, this is something that you're gonna have to do right if you're gonna translate certain characters from comics to the game. Not every hero is Hawkeye with a bow and arrow. In fact, quite a few Marvel heroes kinda need to get into melee to do anything. And typically, melee only is a playstyle that is reserved for tanks and tanks alone. I mean, even Overwatch decided that the melee-centric DPS should just be another tank. But the Marvel Rivals devs said screw that noise and gave us 5 different melee-centric characters, all in the damage category, and they all somehow have their own playstyle at launch. Wolverine is a tank shredder and deals damage based on the opponent's health, which is thematic for a character that has gone up against the likes of the Hulk, Colossus, and the Juggernaut in the comics. Black Panther is incredibly mobile with his dashes and resets, and is one of the harder characters to execute in the game, but feels so rewarding to use effectively. I haven't really gotten around to using magic, but having a slow-hitting greatsword character is pretty cool, especially with her mobility and converting damage to bonus health. I also like how the devs added a character that's a relative no-name in pop culture, and it kinda shows that they're not afraid to pull from the more obscure Marvel mythos. Her inclusion, along with Luna Snow and Jeff the Shark, is likely telling us that any character is on the table, and I love that. Moving on, there's also Iron Fist, who quickly became my favorite character and is an absolute menace in the eyes of the community. Seriously, I think this guy's just a bit overtuned at the moment, but I love his flank-heavy playstyle and self-sufficient kit. And of course, there's Marvel's eternal golden boy, Spider-Man. Like many people, Spider-Man was the character that I wanted to see play in the game, and he does not disappoint. He really plays like a combo-based fighting game character with a ton of mix-ups and skill expression in a hero shooter. The devs did this man justice. Also, they got Yuri Lowenthal to voice Spider-Man again, reprising the character from the Insomniac games, and I love that. And a real quick tangent, the voice cast in this game is absolutely insane. Steve Blum as Wolverine, Nolan North as Rocket, Laura Bailey as Black Widow, Liam O'Brien as Doctor Strange, and Travis Willingham as Thor are all standout performances, but my pick for best voice actor in this stacked list is Troy Baker as Loki. I've heard this man's voice as Batman, the Joker, Joel from The Last of Us, and so much more. They made the perfect choice to voice the God of Mischief, and it's incredibly thematic, because speaking of, Loki is another example of how the devs break game design convention. First of all, he is a healer with an overloaded kit. And in most hero-based games, being overloaded is usually something reserved for carry or more damage-centric heroes, but Loki unarguably has the most tools in the game over anybody else. First of all, his primary fire is his main way of healing. If it hits a teammate, it heals them, but also it heals and damages in an area around the target hit, meaning that it can heal and damage if you're hitting both an enemy and an ally. On its own, it's kind of weak, but Loki can have up to 2 clones on field that don't move but replicate his primary fire, allowing him to triple his healing and damage output. If that's not enough healing for whatever reason, he can deploy a healing field around himself and all of his clones for a much stronger heal. And if he's ever getting gone on, he can swap places with any of his clones at will. And if that's not enough, he can go invisible to gain bonus move speed and self-healing, which creates a clone in place, by the way. And for some reason, he has a backstab passive, so he deals bonus melee damage from behind. Honestly, putting it all together, this kit kind of feels unfair to play against, but it makes sense because he's Loki. And that's all without his ultimate, which just lets him turn into any hero in the lobby for quite a bit of time. And while that's nothing new, copycat characters are kinda everywhere these days, they usually have the caveat of only copying an enemy or copying certain parts of the skill set. But Loki completely ignores the convention and copies the target's entire base skill set, including their ultimates, and can be used on enemies or allies. So if your team wants to and you're coordinated enough, you could just have 2 ulting Star-Lords, 2 Hulks, or 2 whatevers, or you could do the ultimate Giga Chad move, which is to turn into the enemy and kill them as their own character. Friendly reminder that this guy is a healer. From a design standpoint, I absolutely adore how game-breaking some of these characters are. As if a commitment from the developers that they'll retain the essence of the characters even if they're fundamentally unbalanced. And as much as I love this game so far, it's not without its flaws. The major issue that I feel with the game right now is that there's a pretty heavy bias towards one role. Like most hero shooters, the game naturally separates the characters into classes. Vanguard, which is your beefy frontline, Strategist, which are your healers and supportive cast members, and Duelist, which will be your main sources of damage. However, the Duelist role just has a lot more variety in terms of characters, which means damage players fundamentally get a lot more options than the other 2 roles, even if the devs really tried to put some of the fan favorites into the other roles instead. I mean, Hulk, Captain America, Thor, and Magneto are all household names coming from the Marvel roster, and they're all Vanguards, whereas Loki and Rocket Raccoon are your most popular choices for your strategists. But DPS players get Black Panther, Black Widow, Hawkeye, Star-Lord, Winter Soldier, The Punisher, Scarlet Witch, Wolverine, Spider-Man himself, and a lot more. In a 33 character roster at launch, there are 8 tanks, 7 healers, and 18 damage dealers. The Vanguard and Strategist roles really just need more characters for diversity in gameplay. I understand that because of the nature of Marvel's hero roster, most of them are going to end up as DPSs, but some characters could have been shifted to Vanguard like Wolverine and Magic, whereas others could have been healers like Scarlet Witch. It's just annoying because Overwatch had this exact same issue at launch, where there were a lot more damage dealers versus tanks and healers, and it's like the devs copied the formula but didn't learn from their mistakes. But that's kind of it for my critique of the game. I think that right now, the game has a lot of excitement around it because there are so many characters that could feasibly fit into Marvel rivals. I mean, off the top of my head, there's Deadpool, Human Torch, Daredevil, Luke Cage, and No Stones Thanos. But we've kinda already seen that the game is willing to take risks with its characters, so really nobody is off the table. Imagine an Ant-Man in this game, or Quicksilver, or even my personal Hail Mary pick, The Maker. I really enjoy that this game is willing to put in mechanics that just don't exist in other games for the sake of balancing. I'm genuinely impressed by the risks that the Marvel Rivals devs are willing to take, which gives us a refreshing iteration of a core gameplay formula that we've admittedly seen before, and I can't wait to see what's next. And if you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and comment who you would want to see added to the roster in future iterations. I'll be doing some Marvel Rivals content in the future, so be sure to subscribe for more. That's all for now, and ace out.